for the Bills, who are back at it against Miami tonight. It's 6:40 here on WEEU. Big Castellanos will be benched by last night for what was described by the manager as inappropriate comments. That team's taken out a Monday's win over Miami. All right, as you can see, I have the NC 173 all back together and calibrated. Now, the NC 173 has a selectivity section in here. What that's for is if you're using it for Morse code, and there's a guy next to you, and he's bleeding over on your frequency, you can adjust the selectivity to get rid of him to a point. He may be too close, and he might be running more power than you're running. But anyway, this set, the difference between this set and an NC57 is the selectivity section, and it weighs twice as much because the coils are bigger. It has two chokes in the power supply, which are heavy. The power supply is more heavy because you got extra tubes, but it all comes down to this. I want to explain a few things to you real quick. Most of these radios around the 50s, let's say 1945 to 1965 were RCA patents. So everybody is basically making the same radio, putting a few, changing the names of the bells and whistles on it. But in the end, on the bottom of this national and on the bottom of an NC57, it tells you what patent it is, and it's RCA. And the Hammerlands of the time are very good. I would suggest them over Hellcrafters. Hellcrafters is all name, all razzmatazz, and I have them, and they're not as good. And if you go reading, you'll see someone will say something stupid like a Hellcrafters S40 is better than an NC57. It's not. There's like 6 parts, and I've done videos on this. There's 6 parts in an NC57 that aren't in the Hellcrafters S40. The front end is poor, and the people that had them were changing the tubes, changing different things, resistors, to get more sensitivity in the front end. But when it comes to AMDX, you'll see another pattern. Early ones are RCA. This radio has a good AM broadcast section on it because it's an RCA patent. And RCA didn't want to come out with FM radios because they were making so much money selling. They were making so much money selling AM, they didn't want to go to FM. And read about Edwin Armstrong, how he killed himself because of this. RCA was just stringing them along, and his wife ended up suing RCA and getting the money. But RCA basically was in everybody's, but in other words, they were the people producing the actual circuits. Everybody else was changing where the knobs are, changing the color of the radio, but in the long run, they were RCA patents. Now, say you want to get to AMDXing, and people will tell you right away, get yourself a super radio, a GE super radio. Well, RCA and GE had to break up. They were the same companies, and the Super Radio 3, sometimes made by RCA, sometimes it's made by GE. It's basically the same company. There are some slight changes in it, and people will say, well, the better one is the RCA, blah, blah, blah. Other people say, no, it's the GE Super Radio 3 within a certain serial numbers. I have one of them serial numbers. What I don't like about the Super Radio 3 is the tuning dial. It uses a dial cord, and it's springy. It feels springy to me. So I have an SR3. I have an SR2, which is Super Radio 2. That one there has the tweeter, woofer and tweeter speaker. An SR1 doesn't have the tweeter. So they tell you the SR2 has the best sound of an AMDX radio. Now you say, well, why do I want great sound? Well, people that want super radios, they live in part of the country where if they're outside working, they can't get anything. And they need a super radio. And they're not going to get FM because there's mountains all around. There's parts of this country that there's people still using a super radio. And yes, you can, if you do have a phone, now you can stream music while you're working with the cell phone if you have a tower nearby. But if you watch Shango 66, he goes out in the desert and he brings different radios out there to show you how sensitive they are to this one station. But here's where he's wrong. What he does is he knows the station where he lives is real weak and it's hard to do. He trims the trimmer caps on the back of the tuning capacitor to maximize that signal. Well, that's not how an AM radio is calibrated. Basically, you go between the low end and the high end with a generator, and it's a compromise. And what he's doing is he knows what station is the weakest in his area, and he's tuning the radio up to get that station better. But when you go some other location, one of the stations you're trying to pick up won't be as loud on the radio because he's tuned it up for that other frequency. Now there is a guy on the internet that took a radio and he put signals into it, and he noted he used the 50 millivolts at the speaker, and he actually has the microvolt front end sensitivity, but he could have screwed up. His signal generator might be not even along the frequencies. So he's seeing drop-offs as he tunes the dial. Some of that could be his signal generator because it uses a coil, and coils have Q, and they do better in different parts of different frequencies. So he didn't use scientific method, but he did basically what I said they should do. Now, if you really dig on any radio, you can find that this radio here, I'll say it's better than 3 microvolts if you change that front end tube. I've mentioned that once before. The 6GHSH. Well, anyway, the front end tubes. So I can't remember the number, but you can get a little more sensitivity out of this radio by changing the front end tube. And that's one of the things. Once you own the radio, you look around, you'll see someone says change the tube, you'll get more sensitivity. That's if you're AMDXing. Now the elephant in the room is what you're going to listen to on AM broadcasts. Now some stations are switching back to music because they've been part of a network, a political network, and nobody's really listening anymore. So there are stations that are dropping their format and they're going back to just music because in order to have the FM station, they have to keep the AM station going. There's a lot of wacky stuff going on right now, but I just want to tell you, your super radios are really good. The other thing too is Shango will do some Arvin, and Arvin radios, if you get the right model, have the large ferrite rod. They have a 3-section tuning capacitor, and they have an RF front end amplifier. And that's what you look for. When you want a DXAM, you got to have that RF front end, a good long ferrite rod. And that's what the Channel Master, same thing. It's got that big freaking ferrite rod on the, I think it's a 6515 model. But what's wrong is the dial is not conducive to doing AMDX. It's like an Art Deco dial. But if you only want to listen to one station, and once you find it, yes, that radio will work for you. Say you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you want to go out and, I don't know, look for arrowheads, and you want to have the radio with you. And you don't want to stream with your radio, with your phone. But it's the hobby. In other words, it might have been when you were younger, You used to tune around on the dial, and it's nostalgic. You're finding old stations that are really far away, and you listen to it. But in the old days, they had their own format. And then as we got national networks, uh, you're listening to politics almost all the time. And both political parties are trying to brainwash you. And which one's better? Which one's better for you? I don't know. Uh, I tend to care about people that are poor, but at some point, poor people make big mistakes. You can't fix stupid, and they keep. I know people personally that I try to help, and you can't fix stupid. So you throw all this money on all these programs, and it doesn't get any better. Now, the Republicans don't want to throw any money to anyone but the rich people. So, which side are you really on? Now, I have a friend, he's a mailman, and he thoroughly believes that you want rich people to get the money because they create jobs. That's an absolute lie. He believes that you can't fix stupid. All right? I can tell you most jobs or new businesses are created by people that have a dream. Uh, Rich people, they buy those companies up and then suck the life out of them. So it's not true. And then the other thing, real quick, where does wealth come from? All right, you work hard every day. You've worked for a company for many years. You've borrowed money on a credit card and paid it back on time, and you get a certain amount of credit. So you have an A1 credit rating. You go to the bank to borrow $100,000 to buy a house, and they look at your credit rating. They say, absolutely, you always pay back. Here's $100,000. Then at the same time, the Fed prints $300,000 or more against you. So you created the wealth. Now the rich people try to get the money that you created. Now the poor people, like say the Democrats, they're trying to use the wealth that you created to help poor people. But a large amount of poor people, they don't get any better. Once you start giving them money, they get lazier. Years ago, someone said to fix that would be to you give someone welfare or whatever, but make them go out of the house and pick up litter in their neighborhood. Well, that's considered unfair. So that's I have a problem with both parties. If you ever wanted to know where my politics lie, um, I had a friend that was basically a Nazi party. He's dead now, and he was basically Nazi this, Nazi that, and he didn't like people because he felt they were lazy. So he got a job at this company, and I could tell you the name of the company, but in other words, after they're working there a while and really working hard, he realized that other people were getting ahead of him because of who they knew, and he wasn't lying. And then he quit that and he got another job. And then one day I bumped into him at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he looked at me. He goes, "Remember I was all into that Nazi stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Now that I'm older, I've become a Democrat. I realized that being Democrats do push money into the public versus taking money out of the public." And I said, "Well, it really doesn't matter back then. Both parties were a lot alike, but now it's really gotten bitter. There's real bitter nonsense going on now." But I just want to tell you, that's why I have a problem with the radio. We're back there. I'm doing the weave, as Trump would say. In other words, you're listening late at night to stations that are further away, and they're just political now. Years ago, there'd be a station, and it would have bluegrass music on, and a guy would explain to you, up next is this, and you'd sit there and you could listen to bluegrass music. You also had some rock stations on AM, way back, and the guy would have his own records that he brought into the station, and you listen to that. Now, if you listen, I think it's 70/40 Zoomer radio at night. They play a different type of music every hour. 70s at 70, 80 at 80s, and their commercials are you can handle them. They're for cruise ships and stuff like that. And then the Grand Ole Opry is still on, and that's a different type of station too. But the elephant in the room is there really isn't anything worth listening to. But I have what they call emotional anchors, and I had a NC 125 I bought from a kid at Reds, and I DX'd with it with a loop antenna I made, and back when there was only 4 television channels, they were in repeats around the holidays, Christmas, and I'd go up in my room and I'd DX AM stations. And sometimes I'd listen to shortwave, but shortwave was propaganda. So I'd go up in my bedroom and I'd listen to these bluegrass station, a rock station where someone brought their own records in. There were people like on FM, WNEW, the Nightbird. She used to bring in records that were hers and played them. But in other words, and that was later on. But early on, you would hear British invasion records. Out of Canada. I also tell you a story about you couldn't get hockey games on television. They weren't on. So these guys at school, they started getting into hockey. And I said, you can get on a good radio, you can pick up hockey stations. And they're like, what? I think it was 800 for out of Canada and 600. Well, anyway, one of those 2 stations played hockey games. And they come into school and they're like, I put it on last night. It come in really well. I said, well, that's because it's wintertime. Come summer, those stations will be all kinds of static from electrical storms. But in other words, for hockey season, a good AM radio, you could listen to hockey games instead of just reading about it in the paper the next day. And so that was years ago. Now it's all changed. You can stream any station. Once you pick a station up, you can say, oh, that's pretty good. Like the Sweet 16 here. You pick it up, and then you go on the internet, and you click in it, and now you have it streaming to your computer or to your phone. But I have an attachment to radios because I know the circuits, and I know how they work. And I got very addicted to buying radios lately because I was hiding from the nonsense going on in the country. All right, we don't have any more adults anymore. When I go out and I talk to younger people, their mindset's totally different. I grew up. At some point, your parents stop handing you money, and they say to you, "You need to go get a job." And then you got a job, and I stayed with my first job for 3 years. And the guy that owned it. He was always up to something, and he would break you mentally so he could control you. And he's dead now. And I just realized it. And it was across the street from my house. So if I wanted to take a day off, I had to go in and out of the front door so he wouldn't see that I was home. It just wasn't worth it. All right. And then my second job, I was in Florida for 3 months. I had to learn all these jobs, avionics, and bring them up to West Orange. It was McGraw-Edison, and I set it up and I trained people. And the boss we had, Goldbrick, he was worthless. He kept saying he knew all this stuff. It was all bullshit. Had him, and I had the other boss. I won't tell you the other boss's name because he's still alive. But both of them are Danning-Kruger effect. Basically, they thought they knew more than what they did. And then when they got into trouble, they wouldn't ask for help. And they would just, well, anyway, bad boss. But I want to tell you, buying these radios, I've been able to stop it. I'm switching my hobbies over. A couple of people have asked me, do I want certain things, like a Chromebook or something like that. No, I don't want more electronics. I don't want to learn anymore. People, well, you got to keep learning every day. No, you don't. I have to deal with people around here that they haven't learned anything new since the 12th grade. And once in a while, I bump into someone that's really smart, or smart in one area, and I can kind of talk to them. And but basically, I don't want any more radios. I've been reorganizing my equipment that I have, and it's amazing how many radios I was buying. I was buying a new radio, or a radio every 9 months, taking it apart, recapping it, getting it working, putting it on the pile, getting another radio. And I kept doing that. And then after a while, I started realizing, okay, all your long distance AM radios have that front end uh, tuned RF section. That's what makes it long range. Well, how good? Well, some of the older radios use germanium transistors, and they make a hiss noise. So even when you got the radio on, you're hearing a hiss noise, and that's not atmospheric. That's from the transistor. So now you go up to like the SR2, which is the GE, that has silicon transistors in it. Now the Arvin's got germanium. So I've narrowed down to the ultimate best radio for AM DXing is the SR2. The SR3 is, it's very tricky to get one that's good. There's a couple different, there's RCA and GE making them, supposedly. And some models are better than, some batches are better than others. Well, the SR2 is actually made by GE. It's got the two speakers. It's got a woofer and a tweeter in the front. And it's small. It's not a large radio. It's heavy, but it has silicon transistors in there, so you don't get the hiss. And the best radio is considered the Panasonic 220, 2200, whatever. Well, Panasonic bought this company, National. The way I understand it, it merged. So this radio has really large coils in it. It's tube. You can change the one tube in the front end. It becomes more sensitive. The problem with using this thing, you can't move it around. It's 50 pounds. The other thing too is there's 11 tubes heating up when you're using it. So after about an hour, this uses more energy than an SR2 would use in an entire month. And that's the downside. But if you like working on stuff, this radio is pretty cool. This is an NC173. There's a 180 something, maybe 183. That one there doesn't have the sensitivity of the front end of this one. I don't know what they did to it, but it has two separate tubes for the front end RF. And that's what I was originally going to buy. But certain radios on eBay are ridiculously expensive. Now this radio here, you say, oh, that looks really good. Well, it looks to be deceiving. See, this is the picture the guy showed. Let me show you. Take this knob off. How did that happen? Huh? How did that happen? But this is the crap you'll get on eBay. And then this knob here was shorted out. This might have got whacked, and I had it. And that was if you go look at the videos, that was very hard to get in and get that out. And then the guy bodged the mechanism for this would be the band spread. It was off the wheel and the whole thing. And then I took it apart under a camera, and I realized he had the washer in the wrong place. I'm like, why isn't this spring doing anything? That's because the guy bodged it. He didn't know what he did wrong. And then I had to take the main tuning unit apart just to see where he went wrong. I found it, and then I can go back and fix that. But you know, it is a good radio. But I have NC57s that are just as good as this one. They don't have the S meter. This is an S meter up here. The NC57, there is an external one if you can find one, and then this has the selectivity section, which the NC57 doesn't have. But my favorite radios now, NC57, tube national radio, and NC57. That's my favorite tube radio. And there's 3 models of that thing. 4 models including the AC/DC set. And you want the copper disc in it for the tuning with the weighted weight. It just has a nice feel when you're tuning it. That's why I don't like the SR3, which is the GE Super Radio. It's just springy. When you're turning the tuning dial, you actually can feel the wire or the string. I'm not happy with that radio. But the SR2, which is Super Radio 2, GE, that's pretty decent. Looking at it, it's got a large ferrite rod. It's got the 3-section tuning capacitor. It's a long distance radio, and go watch Shango. He's tested them all, and I have a Panasonic one that's a long range, and I have a Radio Shack one. But they're basically were built to be better than the average radio. So if you're in a distant location and you want to get an AM station, this is years ago when they were made. The Radio Shack was good, and so was the Panasonic. But now, moving forward, Shango tests the radios, and you'll see that the Panasonic, it doesn't pick almost nothing up out in the desert. That's what he's doing. He's out in the desert, and he knows this one station is really hard to get. And then sometimes you'll see him go in there, and he'll tweak up the tuner. And there's two tweaks. They're the tracking for the AM front end, the RF amp. You can tweak them if you have a favorite station, but when you calibrate, you go down a bottom frequency, you turn it, get it as best you can, go to the top. You want that to track the whole band as best it can. It's a compromise. But if you go in there with a screwdriver, yes, you can take a station you can barely get, and you could tweak the two coils for the RF front end, and you can tweak them up to get more signal. But then if you go to a different part of the band, you won't have any stations. You've biased it for the station or that part of the band that station you want is on. There's a lot to this, and the deeper you dig, the more you realize the older ones are all RCA patents. Even is it AR88, something like that, or AAR? That's an RCA. It's the same circuit as what's in this thing. And you're like, well, that circuit's the same as that. That circuit's the same as that. And they changed from metal tubes to 7-pin tubes. And that's the only difference between some of the models. And when they did that, they made the transformer lighter. They took out one of the chokes for the power supply. I told you, they figure out that the customer won't notice the difference. Only if you have both radios side by side. And then the guy that reviews them, he might catch it and say, they took one of the power supply chokes out. So now, if you're very sensitive ears to 60 cycle noise, you'll hear the hum. And some people don't. They're deaf at 60 cycles. And it's just amazing when you get really into radios. And I did. I got really into them. And I didn't spend a lot of my savings on radios, but it's a pretty big chunk. And I did the same thing with CNC machines. In order to keep innovating and making it cheaper, I spent a lot of my retirement money. And then you only get the copycats and people that troll you. It wasn't worth it. When you look back, I wouldn't do it again. With the radios, I have an emotional anchor because I had that NC 125. Me and my father built on Christmas morning the KT 120. Now I'm going to forget. 135, KT 135. And then my dad brought me home a Philco chassis. That was not a regenerative. It was a super heterodyne circuit, and that thing is still considered a good radio to this day. I can't recall the number of that model. I have it written down somewhere. I think that's it. But I just wanted to tell you, there is no real reason to have a long distance AM radio unless you're in a part of the country where you can't get nothing, and then it might help you out. But everybody's streaming using their cell phones, But years ago, when I got these emotional anchors, television would go into repeats around from Thanksgiving to New Year's. So I would put the TV on, and there was a reruns. So I go up to my room and put the old NC 125 on, and with my loop antenna, tune it in, do a certain part of the band, and you sit there. I remember one year that they had the barking dog that barks Jingle bells. Ooh, 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 ooh. I can tell you, it was emotional. I worked at RCA at the time, and we were laid off. That was another thing. We were laid off every holiday. The company was getting ready to close down the tube division and send it to South America. So I would be home from right after Thanksgiving to the New Year's. And then we go back to work. And then we had a meet in the cafeteria, and unemployment would help us fill out the paperwork, and we would apply. And we get like 4 weeks back unemployment. It was a piece of cake. It was really nice. But all good things come to an end. I think that's it. All right, that's it.